All right, ready to dive in. Today, we're tackling Zone Z's tiny changes, big impact. I know you're a fan of this kind of stuff, so what are you hoping to get out of this deep dive?
Less overwhelm, for sure, and some solid strategies for building better habits.
Makes sense.
Oh,
Zone just really hits on that feeling of um, being overwhelmed, right? Like,
hmm
just thinking about change can be a hurdle.
Totally. And they cover so much: mindfulness, decluttering, even stuff like time management and nutrition.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
So one of the things that grabbed my attention right away was, well, the whole tiny changes concept. Like, you don't need to flip your life upside down to make
Right.
progress.
The small stuff adds up.
Exactly. It's those small, consistent actions that matter. Does that ring true for you?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people get stuck thinking they need these huge, dramatic changes, but it's like, who can keep that up?
Totally. Zone Z's even uses that example of swapping sugary snacks for fresh fruit. It's not about being perfect. It's about one small swap you can actually stick with.
Yeah, consistency is key. Instead of, aiming for this impossible standard and then giving up completely.
So true. What about you? What's a small change you could make, like right now, that you think you could stick with?
Hmm, that's a good question. Maybe I'll try that reading before bed thing instead of scrolling on my phone for hours. Speaking of being present, what do you think about all the mindfulness stuff? Zonadzi seems to link it to habit change a lot.
Yeah, it's all about awareness, right? Like hitting pause and actually tuning into your thoughts, your
And
actions.
your triggers. Like what's setting you down those not so great paths?
It's like instead of just, hitting snooze every morning without thinking,
Mm.
you actually notice how it makes you feel, how it impacts your whole day. And then maybe you make a different choice.
Exactly. There's that one technique, the 5 4 3 2 1. Have you heard of that? It's for grounding yourself.
No, but I'm intrigued. What's the deal with the
Oh,
numbers?
it's all about your senses.
Yeah,
You take a second and name 5 things you see, 4 you can touch, 3 sounds you hear.
two smells.
Yep. And 1 thing you can taste. Super quick way. Just get out of your head and back into the present moment.
I like that. It's like a mental reset button.
It is. And speaking of, well, resetting and simplifying, what about all the tiny habits stuff?
Oh, yeah. It's like taking those baby steps we talked about and, well, making them like scientifically sound.
Right. Breaking down these big goals into almost ridiculously small actions.
Makes it less intimidating. Like, I could totally handle that.
Yep. It's like that thing about eating an elephant.
One bite at a time.
Exactly. And there's the example committing to 1 minute of deep breathing each day.
Just 1 minute.
Yeah.
Seems almost too easy.
That's the point. But I get what you're saying. Like, is that really enough to make a difference?
Yeah.
It's not just about the action itself. It's about that mental shift. It's like, okay, I can do 1 minute and then you build from there.
It's like opening a door and then there's a whole other room behind it.
Right. And they connect this to minimalist living too. Like, get rid of 1 thing a day or spend 5 minutes decluttering your desk.
Interesting. What did you think about their definition of minimalist living, though? Because it can be kind of a vague term.
It is. But they really focused on the link between your physical space and your mental space.
Like a cluttered room equals a cluttered mind.
Exactly. And they talked about how it impacts your focus, your clarity.
It's about being more intentional with what you allow into your life.
Right. And they even took it a step further, talking about minimalist living in terms of, your commitments, obligations, all of that.
Like decluttering your schedule and your to-do list.
Exactly. It's all connected. Now, gratitude. That's a big one for me. What did you think about all the gratitude stuff?
It's always fascinated me, like how much of a mindset shift it can be.
It's not just some fluffy feel-good thing either. I mean, there's actual science behind how it impacts your mental and physical well-being.
That's amazing.
It can even help with things like sleep, your immune system, anxiety, depression.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. So how does Zonese suggest we actually like cultivate gratitude through those tiny changes?
Well, there's the gratitude journal, of course, but it doesn't have to be that formal. Just taking a moment before you eat to express thanks or even just mentally noticing those good things throughout the day.
It's about shifting your focus, right? Even when things are tough.
And I thought it was interesting how they linked it back to minimalism, appreciating what you have so you're less caught up in wanting more.
I like that. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. What about the nutrition advice? Because honestly, I'm always a little skeptical when books promise easy nutrition advice. What'd you think?
They actually stayed away from all the crazy diets and fads.
Oh, good. So no juice cleanses or anything like that?
Thankfully, no. It's more about small, sustainable changes. Like they gave the example of swapping white rice for like quinoa or brown rice. Simple swap.
Okay, I can get behind that. But is swapping rice really enough to, make a difference?
It's a starting point. And think about it. Choosing whole grains over refined grains has been linked to a lower risk of chronic diseases like heart disease and type 2 diabetes.
I didn't know that.
Plus, you get that extra fiber, which can help with digestion, blood sugar, even weight management.
It's crazy how something so small can have such a ripple effect, huh?
Exactly. And that's what Zona Z is all about, really.
Okay, we've covered mindfulness,
Yeah.
tiny habits, minimalist living, even touched on nutrition. But what about stress? I mean, everyone experiences stress, and it can really get in the way of, well, everything.
They actually talk about that a lot. They call them instant tools for calmness.
Okay, I need those. What are some of the tools they suggest?
Well, there's mindful breathing, for starters, taking those deep, intentional breaths.
I love that. It's amazing how much of a difference just a few breaths can make.
Right. And it's something you can do anywhere, anytime. They also talked about gratitude reflection, taking a moment to appreciate the good stuff, even when you're feeling stressed.
It's like reminding yourself that there's still good in the world, even amidst the chaos.
Exactly. And then if you need more of an energy shift, maybe some quick physical activity, even just a few stretches or a quick walk.
Those are great suggestions. So stress relief, check.
Yeah.
But let's talk time management, because that's a biggie for me. I feel
Yep.
like I'm always fighting the clock.
I hear you. And Zona Z actually frames time management as a path to, balance and well-being, not just productivity, which I appreciated.
Yeah, it's not about cramming more in. It's about being more intentional with how you spend your time.
Right. They had some cool suggestions. Creating a designated workspace, mindfulness breaks, the Pomodoro technique. Have you heard of that one?
I have, but I've never tried it. What's it all about?
Oh, it's super simple. You work in focused 25-minute intervals with short breaks in between.
I like that. Like built-in time to rest and recharge.
And it can actually make you more productive because, you're less likely to get distracted when you only have 25 minutes.
That makes sense. I might have to give that a try.
I think you'd like it. So we've covered mindfulness, tiny habits, decluttering, gratitude, even touched on nutrition and stress relief. A lot to think about.
Right. We've talked about a lot. It's clear that Sonezi's all about those small, consistent actions. But how do we take all this information and actually, put it into practice? That's what I'm curious about.
Well, the next section of the book is all about creating a personalized action plan, which is where the rubber meets the road.
Let's dive into that. So this whole personalized action plan thing, this is where it gets real, right?
Yeah, it's where the doing happens.
Exactly. I feel like a lot of people get stuck here. Like we read the book, get all inspired, but then actually implementing it feels overwhelming.
It can be. That's why having a plan is so important.
Makes sense. So where does Zonezi suggest we start?
They really stress self-awareness, like taking an honest look at your habits, the good and the bad.
Kind of like taking inventory, right?
Yep. What's working? What's holding you back?
What are your strengths and weaknesses?
Exactly. And then from there, it's about setting realistic goals.
And this is where those tiny changes really come into play, right?
Big time. Instead of trying to change everything at once, focus on maybe one or two small changes that you can actually stick with.
So instead of saying, I'm going to become a morning person and meditate for an hour every day.
Right. You start with 5 minutes of mindfulness when you wake up.
Makes it much more manageable.
And they talk about breaking down those goals even further. So if you want to drink more water, maybe the first step is just putting a glass of water on your nightstand.
It's amazing how those little things can add up, huh?
They do.
Yeah.
But I get it. Sometimes it feels like, are these steps too small?
Like, am I really making progress?
Well, that's where momentum comes in. Zonezi talks about how even those tiny wins, they build on each other.
Like a snowball effect.
Exactly. The more you succeed, the more motivated you feel, and the more likely you are to stick with it.
Okay, that makes sense. But let's be real. What about setbacks?
Right.
We're human, we mess up, we miss a day, maybe even a week of our new habit. What does Zonezi say about that?
They're big on self-compassion. It's about progress, not perfection.
So setbacks are inevitable.
Right. They're actually opportunities to learn and grow.
It's that whole growth mindset thing, isn't it?
Totally. They even give tips for getting back on track after a setback, like just acknowledge it without judgment and then recommit.
Beating yourself up.
Exactly. Be kind to yourself. So we've talked about self-awareness, setting realistic goals, breaking them down, embracing setbacks. Oh, and they also talk about finding your why.
Like, why is this change important to you? What are you hoping to get out of it?
Yep. Because when things get tough, remembering your why can really help. It's like your motivation fuel.
It's your guiding light. What else?
Make your goals visible. Write them down, create a vision board, set reminders on your phone, even tell a friend about them.
I like that. Keep those goals front and center. But what about actually tracking your progress? Any suggestions there?
Find a method that works for you. Could
Yeah.
be a calendar, a journal, an app, whatever keeps you engaged. And don't forget to celebrate those wins along the way.
Those little wins matter.
Yeah.
It's motivating, right? But, we're all different. Our needs, our challenges, they're all unique.
Yeah.
So how does Zona Z address that whole personalization aspect of habit change?
That's what I like about their approach. It's a framework, but there's also room for experimentation.
So it's not just a one-size-fits-all thing.
Not at all. It's about listening to yourself, your body, and making adjustments as you go.
Be curious, try different things, find what works for you.
Exactly. And that leads into, well, the next part of the book, which is about embracing change and celebrating success.
Interesting. Why do you think they dedicate a whole chapter to that?
Because change is hard. And it's important to acknowledge that. Plus, it's easy to get so focused on the end goal that we forget to appreciate the journey.
It's like we're so busy looking ahead that we miss what's happening right now.
Right. And that's where celebrating success comes in. It's about recognizing those milestones, big or small.
Even those little victories.
Yep. Because they keep you motivated. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy, just a moment of reflection or maybe treating yourself to something you enjoy.
Make the process enjoyable. That's key.
Totally. And that's what I love about this book. It doesn't take itself too seriously. Personal growth can be fun.
It can be. So Zona Z also talks about the ripple effect of personal transformation. What do they mean by that?
It's this idea that when we make positive changes, it can inspire those around us to do the same.
Our changes become contagious in a
It's
way.
exactly like that butterfly effect.
What if, our commitment to mindful eating inspires a friend to cook healthier meals?
Or maybe our decluttering spree motivates a family member to simplify their life. You never know.
I like that. It's like we become tiny change agents, spreading the message that change is possible.
And it makes you wonder, what kind of ripple effect will your tiny changes create?
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay, so before we get to our final takeaway, let's do a quick recap of some of the key insights from Zona Z's Tiny Changes, Big Impact.
Sounds good. Where do we start?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground with Zona Z's Tiny Changes, Big Impact, mindfulness, decluttering tiny habits, gratitude. I'm definitely feeling inspired.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's not just about the feel-good stuff, though. We dug into some of the science, too, like how these small changes can impact things like your stress levels and your productivity in the long run.
And even your health.
Right. It's like Zoni is giving us permission to ditch that all-or-nothing mindset and, just embrace those small steps.
Which is so refreshing, especially in a world that's constantly telling us to do more, be more, achieve more. Okay, so as we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with something to chew on, something that builds on everything we've discussed, but takes it a step further.
Hit me with it.
So we've talked a lot about the impact these tiny changes can have on our own lives, right? But what if we consider the ripple effect? How might our small shifts impact the people around us?
That's a great point. It makes you think bigger. It's like, how do we fit into this larger ecosystem, like that butterfly effect idea?
Exactly.
Hmm.
So what if our commitment to, mindful eating inspires a friend to try cooking healthier meals?
Or our newfound love of decluttering leads to a conversation with a family member about simplifying their life.
It's like those small actions can create a chain reaction.
A cascade of positive change
I love that. So it's not just about us. It's about contributing to a collective shift.
towards well-being and more intentionality.
Exactly. It's like we become these tiny change agents, showing people that transformation is possible.
One step at a time. And it really makes you think, what kind of ripple effect will your tiny changes create?
Ooh, I like that. That's something to think about. All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive into tiny changes, big impact, I want to encourage everyone listening to embrace those small but mighty adjustments.
Start small.
Pick one tiny change this week, commit to it, and see what happens.
Because even those seemingly insignificant actions can create a big impact, not just on your life, but on the lives of those around you.
So well said. And that's it for this deep dive. Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep embracing those tiny changes that lead to big impact.